What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Donald Trump as we have some big things coming out involving his tariffs. I want to talk about what's going on with the overall market as we have some news involving Russia and the government shutdown. I want to talk about why the market is not bottomed yet, as there's more downside for tomorrow. There's more potential coming, despite the fact that there's going to be a bounce after that coming very soon. So what's going to happen to the markets? Will we dump more? Is the market going to bounce? I'll give you guys my answer. I'm also going to talk about all this news involving politics and such. It's very important to go over that. Just know nothing I'm saying is financial advice. So as far as the market's going, the market was trying to form a base yesterday. SPY was trying to base at 552. And then what happened was we were trying to form an inverse head and shoulders. I mentioned that if we want to turn bullish, we need to see SPY break and hold above 565. If we achieve that, I would have been looking for a big push upwards. However, if we turn bearish, you want to see SPY lose 555. If we lost it, I said I would turn bearish. Lo and behold, we tried to bounce with PPI data that came out. The data was quite decent, showing more signs that inflation is slowing down, at least for now. However, it wasn't really enough to save the markets as we had more news involving politics that caused this rug pull. This signifies that there's more downside potential. The market is not fully priced in the tariffs and all this news, and there's a lot of fear involving a government shutdown that's causing the market to sell off. Now, this may continue into tomorrow, but we're going to be watching to see if we get a bounce because we do have bullish divergences that are continuing to develop. There's also a divergence between SPY and the VIX because the VIX is actually forming a lower high. So that kind of could be indicative of us potentially forming a bottom very soon. So if you look at the VIX, for example, this has been declining. It's trying to bounce just a tiny bit, but it's making a lower high despite the fact that the market's making new lows. That could signify a bottom's coming soon, but we're not ready yet. So yes, the chart is bearish. Yes, we could dip more tomorrow. I do favor that, but there will be a bounce coming eventually. I'll talk about exactly how this could pan out. Let's first talk about the news. So once again, as a reminder, I went over this data already, so I'm not going to go over all the details, but initial jobless claims was okay. And then the PPI data was kind of decent. All the numbers were below expectations. That's a sign that inflation is slowing. This is why the market saw a small push in the morning, only to get a big rug pull as time went on. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, March 14th at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the 5-year inflationary expectations, and more current conditions data that's coming out. In my opinion, the data is not going to likely be the best because consumers are quite fearful, especially with the tariffs coming out and more fears about inflation and such. So this may be a little bit bad data, at least to start things off, but we'll see if we get a bounce towards the end of the day, if not by next week. But for now, why is the market bearish? Well, we have all this news involving politics. First off, Donald Trump is saying that he is open to imposing 200% tariffs on alcoholic beverages imported from the European Union. He wants to do this in response to them increasing tariffs on whiskey, and that's basically his role of continuing the trade wars. So President Trump initially said that this is what he wants to do. Obviously, this is just a negotiation tactic, but it's not the best of news. And then there is more news from Donald Trump saying that the US is being ripped off. He said that very recently. He said that he does not want the US to be ripped off anymore. And he mentioned that he's not going to back down from this. He started talking about that. So he said it's very important to remember this. He did also mention that he doesn't think we're going to be entering a recession this year. He did correct himself. That wasn't really making as many headlines because there are other sources saying that there's currently about a 40% chance we had a recession this year, according to JP Morgan's chief economist. So keep that in mind. Despite that, Donald Trump is insisting we're likely not going to be entering one. Now, Donald Trump also said that he's not going to be backing down from U.S. tariffs on Canada, and he mentioned that he's going to continue to do what's necessary. He said that he's not going to bend at all when it comes to the tariffs on aluminum or steel or cars. That's his quote. He said we're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. That's what President Trump is now trying to say. He also mentioned that Canada could become the 51st state of the United States, and he went on to say that he's not going to slow down. So Donald Trump has been threatening even more tariffs. He's saying that he's going to continue to do what's necessary. He believes he's doing what's best for the U.S., but he did also acknowledge that there could be a short-term kind of like transition phase that's going to hurt the economy for the beginning. Not to the point where it causes a recession. He's saying that's likely not going to happen, but he's saying there's going to be some pain and we have to just, kind of deal with it. It's going to be okay for the long term. And he believes the long term is still going to be very prosperous. Those were his words. Then on top of this, Donald Trump also announced that he wants to place more restrictions on Russia's oil, gas, and banking sectors. That's some big news that's coming out as well. And then when it comes to Russia, I just want to say one thing that's very important. So there's a ceasefire deal that's trying to be signed right now between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine has once again agreed to it. However, Putin has mentioned that Russia has supported the idea of a ceasefire now, so they're supporting it. But for any truce to happen, they have to address the root causes of the conflict, and many crucial details need to be sorted out. So, in my opinion, this could be a bullish catalyst still if they do end up signing the ceasefire. They are in support of it, but they need more negotiations to go through to address a lot of problems. So keep that in mind. If they sign the deal, that could be good for the markets. We'll see if it happens tomorrow or during the weekend. For now, we are still bearish despite that, so keep that in mind. A couple more things. One more thing to talk about is going to be this. There's a lot of talk about a government shutdown. So what's happening is the current funding of the U.S. government is going to be expiring on Friday, which is going to be tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, the shutdown does not mean that everyone's going to lose their jobs. It just means that there's going to be some pauses and delays to government funding for people to get paid. Certain federal workers, the U.S. government has about 800,000, or I would say about 2 million of these federal workers, but it's supposed to be downsizing. There's about 800,000 of them that could see delays in payments from what I'm looking at. So that's some very, very big news. So what's happening is they're dividing workers between them being essential and non-essential just based off their roles. Let me make it very clear. I believe that every worker is essential. This is just how the government kind of classifies them. And certain workers will get delays in their paychecks if we get some kind of government shutdown. Also, some benefits could get delayed for people that have like healthcare and such. But there's going to be a lot of things that happen. So we don't really want this to happen. It's going to be affecting other countries. It's going to be affecting workers. It's going to be affecting a lot of different things. That's why we have to see how this is going to pan out. So far, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill. It's going to the Senate, and the Senate is arguing right now. They're arguing like crazy about this. The Democrats want to propose a different bill, whereas the Republicans want to pass the one that's already been passed by the House. So they're both arguing in their own ways. This is what typically happens, and what usually happens is at the very last minute, they end up providing the bill, which could help the markets. So my suspicion and question is the market going to see a lot of this, like a lot of these cantankerous arguments up until the last minute? And if they do pass the bill, maybe during the weekend, it could happen, maybe by Friday night. As long as it happens very soon, that could help the stock market. So we're waiting to see if that's going to happen. As of right now, the market is fearful about a possible government shutdown. They're fearful about the recession. They're fearful about Trump's tariffs. And the market is still not getting a break. It's still not bouncing. So there's still going to be some bearish momentum going into tomorrow. Now, despite the fact that we're dipping, okay, we could dip more tomorrow. But if we get the government shutdown that's avoided, if we see another funding bill passed by the Senate, and if we get some kind of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, maybe like a ceasefire, even if it's temporary, that could still help the market bounce in the future. We have the catalysts, but it's going to take some time. Maybe we have another day of red. Maybe we see another big dump, but then later on, there could be that bounce. So keep that in mind. A couple more things. Excuse me. The fear and greed index is currently at 15. If we look at our timeline, this is the lowest it's ever been in years. We've never seen the fear and greed index this fearful for many, many, many years. Momentum is also at extreme fear right now as the market's continuing to dump. The put to call option ratio is exploding as more people are buying puts. And the VIX has been uptrending, but now it's making a lower high, which could be signaling a divergence relative to the market because the market is making lower lows. The VIX is making a lower high instead of higher highs, which could signify a bottom is coming soon. And then lastly, we're seeing fear everywhere, basically. People are very, very scared. For earnings, there's not really much coming out, very minor earnings for tomorrow, so keep that in mind. And then the last thing is, before I talk about the charts, just know that I have a Moomoo link for you guys. If you deposit $100 into an account, if you sign up with my link, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. Deposits $2,000 and you're guaranteed 30, and this offer ends at the end of March. You're also guaranteed an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. Anyways, so with that being said, if you guys are interested in Moomoo, please sign up. Now let's talk about the charts for the rest of the video. So honestly, guys, the market was trying to bounce looking at the trend yesterday, but then the move failed with even more bad news. We've been developing a bullish divergence looking at the RSI. It's been making higher lows technically, but despite that, we're making lower highs and lower lows on the chart. So the chart is bearish. If you look at SPY, we had a lower low, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. We're just continuing to dump. And I think there's a good chance we could dip with the Michigan Consumer Sentiment numbers tomorrow. There might be a little bit more downside coming. But then we're looking to see if we could form a base. I wouldn't be surprised if we were going to be targeting this like the 550 area, if not 545. We could be dipping a little bit more, but we're going to be watching to see if we get some kind of balance depending on some news, especially with lots of shorts expiring. So keep in mind, tomorrow, I think we kind of gap up a little bit. We might be trying to fill this imbalance back up towards like 555 to 557. Then we're going to be looking for a move lower, back down towards these lows. We could be retesting 550. Maybe we go a little bit lower tomorrow. We could dip all the way down to like 545 or so. So one more big downside move. But then here's the thing. I know we've been saying this. There is a strong possibility of some kind of bounce with the bullish divergences and with the potential government funding bill that could be passed. There is potential for us to get a big bounce by the end of the day on Friday, if not by Monday. So keep that in mind. It's going to be very violent once it comes, once we officially change directions to get a temporary rebound move. Why is that? It's because the market will eventually price everything in. The market's very forward looking. And once all of this is priced in, we're going to see a temporary bounce, right? And why do I say that? Well, look at what happened during many different periods. When the market was dumping back in 2024, we saw the market dump. We got a temporary bounce before we continued to go lower. There's another instance right here where we actually dumped a bit on SPY all the way down to about 512. Then we bounced to 520 before we continued to dip. That was just a temporary move down. Look at more significant dumps, such as like 2022. SPY did not dump in a straight line, even when the Fed was raising rates, right? We, we saw a couple of months of red. Then we bounced for a week or two. Then we continued to dump. We bounced for a week or two, then we dumped again. So do you guys see what I'm saying? You don't just dump in a straight line. Typically what happens is you get some kind of like move up. Even look at what happened during the pandemic, right? That is when fear was it could have been even worse with all the shutdowns. The market dumped for about 2 or so weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks, all the way down to 287. We rebounded to 315. Then we continued to dump. We rebounded a bit to about we got a couple of days of rebound before we continued to dump. Then we rebounded. So my point is, even when you get these flash crashes, whether you're in a bear market, even if it's 2008, we're not going to dump forever, guys. We're eventually going to see some kind of a temporary bounce by at least 20 points, in my opinion, before we may continue to go lower. So do I think we're going to bounce? I think we will eventually, but the chart does not show that. The chart is what the king is. So follow the price action. If we're bullish, you want to see SPY get back above at least 563. If we break that, we're looking for a bounce. If we're bearish, you want to see us lose 550 for a bigger move down. My guts tells me that we're looking for a move like this to get lower. Then we'll see if we get some kind of bounce move later on, whether it's on Monday or early next week. I'll be watching for that just to be safe, so keep that in mind. The chart's bearish, but there could be a bounce basically developing. On the QQQ, if you're bullish, you want to see us get back above 478. We want to reclaim that to try to bounce, forming a double bottom. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose 467. If that fails us, we have two big supports at 465 and 462 to 460. That's where we could be forming a bottom before we see some buyers defend. My gut tells me that with consumer sentiment coming out, there's going to be another dip move. My prediction is that we kind of push tomorrow and then we see a retest of this. We might go a little bit lower towards 460 to 462. Then we could be forming a bottom and hopefully we get a bounce with a government funding bill. I hope that ends up being the case. Not saying this is guaranteed, but it depends on the catalysts. Technically speaking, it's very likely we do get some kind of like reversal soon, but there's no sign on the chart yet. So we are still bearish like this for now. The trend is still bearish. There is potential for a big bounce to come later on because of Russia-Ukraine news, because of the market potentially pricing in a lot of this negative news, and also potentially because of the fact that the government could be funded soon. So that those could cause a big bounce back up towards the much higher 490s. But we'll see. So be very, very patient. For now, the chart remains bearish. Look for another low to be made tomorrow, and then we should be looking to see if we get a bounce by the end of the day or not. On the Russell 2000, making lower highs and lower lows, we're still bearish. We also broke our lows here, coming all the way down to about 197, which is not a good sign. We could try to push higher. I think in the morning we try to push for like 200, but then we're watching to see if we get a big rejection back down. If that rejects, we could be dipping into 197, then 195, all the way down here. Now, that's the more bearish case. The bullish case would be a break above 202. My guts tells me that we could be dipping a little bit lower. So we could kind of push like this in the morning, then start dipping back down towards the low at 195. Then if we try to form a base here, we're looking for some kind of bounce move. If we reclaim 202, that's when we're going to try to pivot back up. No sign of that yet. For now, we're bearish. So look for the bearish move first. Then we'll see if we get that bounce later on. ES is technically in a very, very critical place where we are riding, we're riding this line down here. So notice we have this support right over here. This is still technically showing that we're on a downtrend. Just because you are trying to hold this line does not mean you have to hold above it 24/7. I wouldn't be surprised if we make a move like this tomorrow and we continue to kind of decline like this just for a bit before we see some kind of rebound move later on. That's what could be coming on ES. But before that happens, there could be new lows to be made. So watch that 550 area. If we can't hold above that, we're going to be dipping to the low 500s. Sorry, the 550s, excuse me. And then before that, if we can't hold 5,500, we could be dipping even more. And then if we try to bounce, we want to see us get back above 5,600. My gut tells me we go a little bit lower. We try to kind of push in the morning. Then we start to dip with Michigan consumer sentiment, make a new low like this, form a nice divergence, and then we could be looking for a reversal by the end of the day, if not by next week. So I'm going to be looking for that as the most likely possibility. On NQ, we look a bit more bearish, making lower highs and lower lows. We're actually trying to make equal lows here, which is a good sign. But I do see a risk of us testing the low 1900s or 19,000s, excuse me. So we could be trying to retest our 20 EMA at 19,500, maybe a little below that. Then we could be dipping to the low 19,000s, and we'll see if this holds or not. This could be forming a divergence. So we'll see if we end up getting some kind of rebound or not. So give this the time it needs. So be very, very patient nonetheless. That's going to be very key for us, so give this some time. For other factors, we have Bitcoin still looking bearish. You want to break 83,000, turn back up. There might be a move back down towards 80,000. If that fails us, we have 77,000 as the first support, followed by around 75,000. We could be dipping back down to 77 to 75,000 first before it tries to bounce, but I will turn bullish if we break past 83,800. So the bullish case is us breaking the 50 EMA to push like this. The bearish case is going to be us coming back down towards 80,000, failing there to get down to 79,000 or below, 75,000 or below. So we could be making equal lows here, if not making another low before this thing tries to rebound. My gut tells me we're going to kind of make a move like that where we kind of dip and bounce first. So keep that in mind. Even Nvidia was trying to bounce, but now it's just barely holding on to supports. We're in a range. If we end up losing 113, we're looking for a dump. If we end up breaking past 117, we're looking for a pump. My gut tells me this might be dipping towards 113. If it doesn't hold, we could be looking for this gap fill down here first on Nvidia. That's kind of a stretch. I don't know if it's going to dip that low, but if it does, that's going to be okay. Then we could be looking for a big bounce after that. We'll see if we make a move like this. I also noticed that this kind of aligns with an inverse head and shoulders, so that's what the most likely possibility. Unless we break past 120 and remain bullish, or if we lose 113 to remain bearish, we'll be watching that. But I'm wondering if Nvidia is going to be making a move like this to form an inverse head and shoulders. I'll be watching this very, very closely. Maybe we get a temporary dip before we see some kind of bounce. Tesla as well, kind of weak here, but we're going to be watching to see if we can make a higher low. I want to see this get back above like 260 to bounce. Might be looking a little bit bearish first before it tries to rebound like this. So be very, very careful with Tesla. We got to get back above 250 to bounce, but there might be some downside move first. Back down to 230 or so before to see some kind of rebound. We could also take our fib level just like this just to measure how low this may go. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get close to our like 0.618 fib level around 230 before it tries to bounce. If we make a higher low, though, this could be a sign that Tesla's trying to pivot. And there could be a bounce next week. So we'll be watching that very, very closely, especially with the funding bill potentially coming out. For Apple, we're still bearish. We're going to be looking at the support way back here. So if you look at the chart and we go all the way back, you'll see that we have the support over here very close to that 210 area. The low 200s are also going to be acting as supports. So it's still looking quite weak right now with the price downgrades from Morgan Stanley and the bad news that came out involving their overall shipments. So could we dip more? It could be dipping to 205 or so, maybe a little bit lower. But we're going to be looking for a base near 200. Once that base is, then I'm going to be looking for a big reversal move, maybe by next week, to make a big move back up towards the 220 plus area. Let's look for a bit more downside for now. Then we'll see if we get some kind of bounce. So please keep that in mind. For a few more tickers, we have Netflix. So Netflix is not looking too good. We're continuing to dump like this, but we want to see if this can make a higher low just like this for a reversal structure. So I wouldn't be surprised if we dip closer to like 870 before it tries to bounce. You want to reclaim 900 to rebound. Could be a dip here before it tries to rebound for 900. Watch that very closely. For MSTR, we look a bit more bullish to fill this gap. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a dip move like this before it tries to push to fill the gap at 285. For Celsius, We're watching support around this 26 area. If that fails, I'm looking for a dip to 25. It still looks kind of heavy here. Looks a little bit distributive to me, so that typically favors a downside move. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a kind of like a pump and a dump like this in the beginning, but then later on, the overall structure could still be bullish as time goes on, right? So look for a pump and dump back down to the 25s most likely. For super micro, we're kind of weak right here. We're trying to ride this trend line up. We did expect this dip yesterday. We were correct about this. Might be coming down to the trend line right here around 37 before it tries to bounce, so keep that in mind. Palantir has an inverse head and shoulders. This has potential. We'll see if we get back above 86 to bounce. So watch for a dip to about 75 before it tries to rebound for 80. And if we get back above that, I'm looking for 85. For Rivian, we look bearish. We're making lower highs right here. We could be dipping closer to about this the 10.5 area or below, and we'll see if we get a bounce there, but we still look a bit more bearish. For SoFi, we're making lower highs here, so we're watching to see how this is going to be moving. Watch the low 11s to see if we get some kind of rebound move. We're trying to hold this trend line right here. If that fails us, we're going to be looking for the next trend line. For now, we are bearish. We could be dipping to about 11 flat before it tries to rebound. And there could be a test of these trend lines over here if this doesn't hold. So like right here is where we could be going before we see a nice rebound for the 12s. AMD is a little bit more bullish. We're trying to make a higher low here. We have a gap to fill up here. So this is actually looking quite decent. We'll see if we fill this gap down here around 96 first before it tries to see a rebound move. That's very possible, as we love to see buyers defend around 95 to 96. That could be a temporary base before it kind of like dips and bounces. So keep that in mind. ARM is also trying to base right here, looking like it has a double bottom. We'll see if we end up losing 110 to start dumping to like 108. I want to see it break 115 to turn bullish. So with the double bottom, we could be pushing 115 to bounce. Coin is looking kind of weak. We're going to be looking for a test of this support. With Bitcoin dumping, we could be looking for the low 170s and 168 as potential targets before we try to rebound. Amazon is trying to bounce here. It looks decent, like it's trying to base. We need to see if 190 holds. If we hold that tomorrow, I'm looking for a bounce back up to 197. Meta is looking so kind of weak here. Might dip to about 585 to 580 before we see some buyers defend. Might be a little bit more downside coming first. Microsoft is looking decent. It's barely holding support. It could be dipping to about 378 to 375 before some buyers defend us and push us to 383. And Google may dip a little bit more towards 163 before it tries to bounce, so keep that in mind. GameStop is kind of weak. We have to try to get back above 22.7 to bounce. We're still kind of on a downtrend. AMC, technically on a downtrend. We're looking for essentially 2.75 as a potential target. DJT is kind of weak. We could be retesting these lows at 18.75 before it tries to bounce. The VIX is making a lower high here, so this could be a sign that the VIX is going to try to push higher and eventually start dipping. Could the VIX be forming kind of like a head and shoulders here? Could this be a sign that the VIX is forming a divergence with the market where it's making a lower high and the market's making higher highs? Could this be a sign we're going to be and the market's making new lows and the VIX is making a lower high? Excuse me, guys. I want to correct myself. We could push a little bit higher, but then this will eventually start dipping to fill this gap down here. That could be a sign the market's going to dip a bit more before it tries to bounce. The 10 year is making higher lows. We want to see it break past 4.37 to rebound, especially as we have this gap to fill. And the dollar is starting to bounce a little bit. Will we push to about 104 before it rejects again? We'll have to see about that. So my view of the market is we're bearish. We're making lower highs and lower lows. No sign of a bounce yet. We could be dipping a bit more tomorrow morning with Michigan consumer sentiment data coming. Might rebound in the morning and start to dump. However, I'm not officially bearish, at least overall. I think that for now we are bearish for the short term, but I still have the potential in mind that there's going to be a bounce coming soon. We're not seeing it yet on the charts, so we remain bearish. SPY could be making new lows tomorrow, like I said, but then the bounce could come later on, maybe after the weekend, after we get some news from the government, or maybe involving the potential ceasefire deal between Russia and Ukraine. So we're bearish. Yes, we're going to likely dip, but I see some bullish potential looking at the bullish divergences. Eventually, we're going to get a very, very big bounce that could be coming within a couple of trading days. So get ready, guys. I'm just here to be very unbiased. Thank you for listening. Have a good one, and peace out.